Herkese merhaba. Hi everyone. I will keep the panel in English, but let me speak in Turkish a bit at the beginning and in betweens. Değerli katılımcılar, öncelikle hoş geldiniz. Bir önceki panelde doğrudan yatırım ve kredilerle ilgili sürdürülebilir finansı inceledik. Bu panelde ise sermaye piyasaları açısından inceliyor olacağız. Çok değerli katılımcılarımız var. Müsaade ederseniz ben kendilerinin de anlamaları bakımından İngilizce olarak devam edeyim. One of our panelists, Ashwinder Bakhshi, he's a long time credit analyst, a seasoned credit analyst with regards to emerging markets, with regards to finance, and more recently with regards to sustainability. We will hear from him. Eli Koen, an old friend, and we've been in the market for years. He is also an emerging market analyst, and he's also more recently been in the area of impact investing, more thoroughly in the area of impact investing, and he knows Turkey very well. And Recep Bildik, Professor Bildik, he is with the Koç University, and some of you may know him. He has been a director of Borsa İstanbul. Değerli panelistler, panele başlamadan önce şunu söylemek istiyorum. Öncelikle tabii ki Sürdürülebilir platformu fevkalade güzel bir zirve yönetiyor. Ve ben de bizzat Mehmet Sungur Bursa Bey ile birlikte bundan 12 yıl önce bu konuların gelişiminde bir kişi olarak onların vizyonerliğini tekrar kutluyorum. Bir şeyi de hatırlatmak istiyorum sermaye piyasalarımız açısından. Biz Sürdürülebilir platformundaki Recep Bey bunu çok iyi bilirler. Kurucu üyelerdendi her zaman en başından beri ve toplantılarda gelişmede bulundu. I had just mentioned that the Sustainability Academy had been part of the Borsa İstanbul platform since its inception, and they have done a very good job in enlightening and expanding the area. Okay, now let me go with the panel, Ashwinder, and the way I will go forward, and we have discussed actually, I will look forward to your thoughts and how you approach ESG investing. And with you, Ashwinder, first, I wonder, why has it become, for the audience to really get a grasp of, why has it become such a focus area? The sustainability investing or sustainability area has become a focus area for everyone, basically. And I would like to hear your thoughts with regards to especially fixed income investing, and maybe at some point the ease for some of the companies that may want to look into it in Turkey. I'm sure they're very good companies. I'm sure Recep Bey will also be mentioning about some of these institutions. So it'd be lovely to hear from you. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Cenk Bey. Thank you for inviting me. First, let me start off by saying, as credit analysts, we tend to question everything. So, when green finance first appeared, we questioned whether it was something, real, whether it was something here to stay, whether it is just a fad. But I think it is now pretty clear that it is not only here to stay, it is going to pretty much change investing, how we think about it and how we see it. And there are not a lot of things driving this. First, of course, is climate change. Climate change is real. We are clearly increasingly seeing unusual weather phenomena. But of course, I'm not a climate scientist. But if I look at the data that we have, and IMF published its report this week, and they talked about the impact of climate change on economies. And the point that they made was, on average, climate change costs economies in real GDP per capita 1.2%. Now, this is an average. Climate change impacts emerging markets disproportionately a lot more. So clearly, climate change as a topic is not going away. The second thing that has happened is regulation. Now, I'm sure this this forum has already talked about EU taxonomy rules, that came in they started talking about them last few years ago, and in 2022 they will go into full force, and that changes everything. So for next 10 years, call it next decade, the whole implementation of taxonomy rules is going to have a big impact both on the investors and issuers. There is going to be greater demand from investors and financial market participants to disclose where we are investing and the entities where we are investing in, how much of those are sustainable investments, how much of our investments are contributing to the net zero target, and how much exposure we have to high carbon intensive industries. So clearly, there is going to be a regulatory focus on financial markets participants, and that is also driving the green initiative. Some other very few important ones, again, regulatory initiatives to mention. ECB in its bond buyback program, has talked about specifically buying green bonds. That has had an impact. In stress tests, EBA, ECB, and Bank of England have talked about including climate risk as a stress test factor for the banks, and they increase in stress scenario higher risk weights, so therefore forcing banks to put aside higher capital if you have exposure to higher carbon intensive sectors. So clearly, banks are going to pay a lot more attention to this. At Barings, what we have done is, and over last, call it 5 years, we have completely changed our investing approach across every single asset class that Barings invests in: equity, real estate, high yield, private equity. ESG is now very much bottoms up part of the investing process, and we are seeing a lot of our other colleagues and other asset managers doing the same. So for investors now, ESG has become a big part of it, but it's no longer enough just to have ESG as part of the investment process. Our investors, people who give us money to manage, are expecting us to take the next step and engage with issuers on what is their ESG strategy, what is their net zero carbon strategy. And what we are increasingly seeing is companies coming up with quite ambitious decarbonization commitments on how they're going to reduce their carbon emission. And I can give you 2 case studies of 2 recent new issues that came into the market this year. One was a cement company from India, Ultratech. Now, cement generally is seen as a high carbon intensive sector, but this particular issuer in its bond documents has given very specific commitments. They're going to reduce their carbon footprint by 27% in next 10 years. And if they fail to achieve that, there is a step up in interest payment. But given this was a sustainability linked bond, one of the first to come out of India, it saw a lot of demand, and they were able to achieve a very good pricing for this instrument, almost equivalent to quasis, although this was a private. Another example, a Greek utility company, PPC, recently became one of the first to do a high yield, a single B rated sustainability bond, again, an instrument which had specific climate change linked targets, and that bond has performed very well as well. And there is something called greenium. So greenium is essentially what we are seeing is that there is now large dedicated funds who are chasing green bonds and green investments, and that is creating actually a premium. So Barclays did a study using, this is for investment grade, but it has implications for high yield and EM as well. They looked at 94 pairs of bonds where an issuer had both green and non-green bond, and on average they found 10 bips of premium for a green bond. So effectively you could issue a green bond cheaper because of the demand. Now 10 bips doesn't sound like a lot, but for a 500 million issue, that means a saving of $500 million. And this is for IG. For high yield, the green premium can be even higher. So my point is, you've had a lot of factors that have come together in one place to make it very likely that this has now taken on a life of its own, and this is something which we all have to focus on.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ashwinder. Let me just very briefly, 1 sentence or 2 sentences mention what you said in Turkish. Şöyle dediler Ashwinder, hakikaten yatırım tarzı değişiyor. Ondan sonra örnek vermek gerekirse iklimin ekonomiler üzerindeki etkisi %1.2'ye kadar çıkabilir diye değerlendirmişti IMF. Regülasyonlar kesinlikle değişiyor ve değişti açıkçası. Ben de izlediğim için biliyorum. Avrupa regülasyonlarında hem yatırımcıyı hem de bir enstrüman çıkaran kurumu etkileyecek duruma geliyor. Dolayısıyla biz de bu piyasalarda enstrüman çıkardığımızda etkileneceğiz. ECB, Avrupa Merkez Bankası ve benzeri bankacı kuruluşlarında artık risk ağırlıklandırmasında etkili olacak. Banka kredileri açısından da etkili oluyor. Ve son olarak da açıkçası fiyatlama açısından avantajlı ve ilgi fazla olduğu için de böyle bir bono çıkardığınızda avantajlı konuma geliyorsunuz.
Cenk, you're on mute.
Sorry, yeah. Anyway, I would ask in English, but we'll translate again. Now, basically, you have been an investor for many years, as I said, in EM world, and especially impact investing has been a scope area, I believe, for quite an amount of time now. And I would like to hear really, why have things moved to impact investing in Turkish Etki Yatırımı? It's I don't know if it's going to be the last step in all this, but I would also like to hear why the investments are moving in that direction and the approach that you have in that. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Cenk. Very happy to be here. Before I answer that question, let me just briefly explain what impact investing is, because it's a new thing, and I don't think it's very clear for everyone. The definition of impact investing is basically investing with the purpose of creating a measurable impact alongside financial returns. And there's two very important things in what I said. One is measurable impact, and the other is financial returns. And let me explain that. It has to be measurable in the sense that you have to have an objective and link it to certain performance indicators and measure those indicators to be able to say that you are doing impact investing. So, for example, it's not enough to say, oh, I want to improve accessibility to education, so I'm going to invest in education companies. You have to choose certain metrics, such as it could be the price, it could be affordability, or it could be the quality of education that you measure through maybe either scores achieved in an exam or the ability of the students to find jobs after they graduate. Whatever it is, you have to have certain targets and measure those, and engage with the companies that you're investing in terms of how they are progressing towards those targets. So that's one very important aspect. The second important aspect of impact investing is that it has to offer financial returns that are similar to returns that you can achieve from similar risk investments. And why is that important? It's what really differentiates impact investing from charity. The problems that impact investing targets are very large problems. And in order to achieve solutions to these very large problems, you need very large solutions. And therefore, they have to be scalable. And the only way to make them scalable is to really offer people, the investors, decent financial returns. Otherwise, it's just limited to charity, and charity does not offer scalable solutions. So what's the difference between ESG investing and impact investing? I think that's an important question. And the easiest way to explain it is ESG investing is about how companies do things. And impact investing is mostly about what companies do. And just to give an example, a tobacco company, a cigarette company, could be a great ESG company. They can take environmental considerations into account. They're usually very good in social aspects. They look at gender diversity. They really support their employees. They give great conditions. They're good in corporate governance, but they could never be an impact company because the product they make is harmful to human health. Whereas for an impact company, the ESG aspect of it is secondary. That's not to say we completely ignore their ESG considerations, but what we focus on is what is their impact. Just to give an example, a solar glass making company, they could have carbon emissions because solar glass making is a carbon intensive process. But at the end of the day, the product they produce is extremely useful to move to a carbon-free future. So even though they may not be perfect on ESG, they may not have the gender diversity that we want to, or they may not be, they may not be great in data disclosure. We will, for us, it is in scope. We will look at them, and our engagement process will be targeted towards guiding them towards better ESG standards. But the priority for us is what they are doing, and finally, how do we decide whether a company is a positive impact or not? The framework we use is United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Basically, if any one company offers a product or a service that is in line with one of the 15 investable sustainable development goals, there are 17 goals, but only 15 of them are actually investable, then for us, it's a company that we would look at. But this is the framework we have chosen. People can choose different frameworks. They can be looking at different things, but this is how we approach and how we select companies. So most of the time, the companies that end up in this process are in areas like renewable energy, waste management, healthcare, education, microfinance. These are the typical areas that we look at.
Thank you, Ali. Now again in Turkish, basically, Eli Bey ifade ettiler. Etki yatırımının önemi ölçülebilir olması her şeyden önce ve etki objektifinin net olarak belirlenmiş olması. Etki objektifi açısından KPI'lara yani ana performans indikatörlerine bağlanmış olması ve dediğim gibi bunun rahatlıkla gelişiminin ölçülebilir olması. Bir de doğrudan yatırımcı olarak da etki yatırımı yaparken dahil olduğunu belirtti yatırımcının. Gelişmeleri yönlendirme açısından da dahil olduğunu belirtti. İyi finansal getirinin esas olduğunu söyledi. Dolayısıyla aslında etki yatırımlarına yatırım yapanlar açısından iyi finansal getiriyi sağlamak hedefi olduğunu belirtti. Ve önemli olanın şirketin neticede ne yaptığı sonuçta olduğunu ve onlara yol gösterenin Birleşmiş Milletler'in sürdürülebilir kalkınma hedefleri olduğunu belirtti. Çok teşekkürler tekrar Ali. Thank you very much. Recep Bey, size geçmek isterim. Siz hakikaten ne kadar zamandır bilmiyorum ama çok uzun zamandır borsada sürdürülebilirlik endeksinin oluşmasında da dahil olmak üzere hem yönlendirici hem değerlendirici ortak olarak bulundunuz. Ve yine Sürdürülebilirlik Akademisi'nin de yer aldığı Sürdürülebilirlik platformunda önemli görevlerde bulundunuz. Dolayısıyla ve en son olarak da benim de görevlerim nedeniyle dahil olduğum YOİK belki bilgi vermek istersiniz ile ilgili olarak çok önemli katkılar yaptınız. Türk şirketlerini de yakından tanıyorsunuz tabii bu incelemelerinizden dolayı. Regülatörleri yakından tanıyorsunuz. Bize bu yönde bir bilgi verirseniz nasıl bir gelişim oldu Türkiye'de? In English, very briefly, Mr. Bildik will give us a scope, basically, regarding how actually Turkey has been moving forward. As he's got a lot of expertise, he's been directly involved in the development of sustainability within the Borsa Istanbul as well, and he's been a long-time veteran now in the area. Recep Bey, please. Thank you.
Cenk Bey, thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much for having me here and also for the great conference organized by Sürdürülebilirlik Akademisi. I just briefly at the first round, maybe I just like to point out the dramatic change that has been happening. Actually, as we might remember the famous quote of the ancient Greek philosopher Heraclitus, who was born and lived in this land from the Ephesus in Aegean part of Turkey in BC 500, who quoted that, stated that the change is the only constant. And we've been witnessing the dramatic change, especially since the Industrial Revolution and the explosion, which brought the explosion of the population and also the production, with the negative side effects such as pollution and the waste and consuming the scarce resources of the humanity and the universe. So we have to pay attention, and I'm glad to see the increasing awareness, especially in the last 20 years, or since the UN Sustainable Development Goals or aims have been established and introduced. There's a concerted efforts all around the world, which has been the pace of this change also accelerated in the last 2 decades. And even at the efforts on the climate change and to tackle with the negative outcomes or consequences of the climate change since the Paris Agreement in 2015, just 5-6 years ago, even the participation to the CDP, Carbon Disclosure Project, and the companies dealing with and reporting and putting more effort for the climate change, and with the environmental sensitivity even doubled almost since the Paris Agreement in the last 5 years. So first of all, but this is of course not enough. Business as usual is not an option now. We have to act urgently for the growing problems, especially on the climate part. And according to some statistics, before I mention about the performance of some Turkish companies, based on some statistics, especially in the emerging countries, we need more infrastructure investments. And in one statistics showing that the 70% of the infrastructure investment needed globally should be made in emerging or developing economies, which brought almost $6 trillion investment needed per year in these emerging markets. So for the next 15 years means $90 trillion. But on the other hand, another statistics that show that the UN SDGs will bring additional revenue and growth at almost $12 trillion per year. So there's also, yes, huge investment needs, especially for the emerging markets, for this transformation to respond or to address the SDG challenges, 17 aims, 169 associated issues or statements need to be responded through this transformation and investment. Yes, and there are enough capital available if the capital is allocated efficiently and effectively. As we all know, that even almost $15 trillion now invested into negative yielding bonds, right, worldwide. But the good news is, as you have stated earlier, now the signatories of the PRI, Principle of Responsible Investment, almost reach out to 3,000 and almost reach to $90 trillion. And the previous session, you also, Cenk, stated that even in just last year, the total investment, sustainable investment, reached out to 45 years by almost increasing 100%. Even in a single product, ETF, sustainable ETFs, attracted a huge amount of investment, and the size of ETFs, sustainable ETFs, doubled between 2019 and 2020, and exceeded to $100 billion. So we have to incentivize with the right policies, right regulations, this capital allocation to respond to the enormous amount of infrastructure investment need, first of all. This is, I mean, my colleague panelist here, Bakhshi, also mentioned about the negative outcome of the climate change, right, on the global GDP. Yes, in last few years, at least, there are certain good examples and initiatives in Turkey. Maybe in the second round, I'll mention more in detail, and by giving some examples from the public-private partnership. But first of all, banks in Turkey have been leading these initiatives with some relatively large-size companies. For example, years ago, banks announced a statement, sustainability statement, 7 major Turkish banks at that time, representing 85% of the market cap of the banking industry, announced sustainable banking declaration in 2017 with the support of Global Compact Turkey. And another initiative, again, led by certain groups, including some banks, part of the circular economy to respond to the limited resources here, the material marketplace Turkey project to use the limited raw materials or materials within the circular economy and reduce the consumption of the valuable materials. This is also another good example from Turkey through this. And recently, more recently, they also Sürdürülebilir Kalkınma Derneği, this is the initiative of the Sustainable Development Association with some, of course, stakeholders represented in 17 different industries. Again, a part of the circular economy target. They started measuring or encouraging the companies to disclose their plastic footprints, like the carbon footprints, plastic footprints. So many companies now started measuring and disclosing their plastic usage and the plastic footprints.
Recep, to leave a bit more time on the second part, if you may, you can just maybe
Sure.
finish up in this one.
Yes, just a few more. And another one is the Arçelik, is the white label goods big consumer operating also internationally. They have another Horizon 2020 funded project for the resource productivity. And instead of using the plastic or the petrochemical based products in the production of refrigerators, for example, they start using corn, soy, or some biologic, including the sugar cane, in the production and manufacturing of the refrigerator, for example. The similar projects, we have listened one from the Fazla Gıda. For the food supply chain, wastes are used effectively by the Fazla Gıda based on a technology they also develop. Another one is the glass conglomerate in Turkey, also operating internationally, Şişecam, using recycled glasses for the production of the new glasses to reduce the carbon emission, industrial waste, and the raw material needed for the manufacturing. So there are some good examples, and the good examples attracting also motivating the other companies to put more effort on this way. Thank you very much. I can continue in the second round.
Excellent. Now, we have everyone 5 more minutes, so very quickly to touch upon. I would just very briefly remind that when we look at pensions and investments information, the active part of investment, and as you have been involved in active part of investment, has been increasing rapidly. Actually, for the last 1 year, for Europe, this has been about 82% of the sustainability investing, and for USA, 75%. Now, having said that, I would love to hear, Ashwinder, first from you. What are the sort of examples you would like to give, actually, and what would you like to add to enlighten everyone? Thank you.
Sure. I mean, what I would like to add is, if I look at, for example, supply of green bonds or ESG-linked sustainable bonds that have, come out of only looking at emerging markets and actually looking at only dollar and euros. Year to date, we have had about 56 deals totaling 23 billion of new issuance. I mean, compare that to last year, full year, we had 37 billion. So we're already running ahead of last year. And then if you look at the sectors from which the new issuance is coming, originally it was mainly used to be government and banks, because it's sort of easier to do ESG and sustainability linked from them. But now we are seeing greater diversification of issuers coming in. Utility sector has become much bigger. And then we are even seeing consumer, energy, industrial, communication. So clearly, sustainability is not only limited to a few sectors, but rather, it is going to apply to a lot more sectors. And as one of the previous speakers mentioned, and I would sort of reinforce that point, with the EU taxonomy rules coming in, I think every corporate, every issuer needs to think about how does it impact them, especially if you trade with Europe, if you export to Europe. Europe is looking at changing the rules around who can even export into Europe and what is their commitment to getting to zero net carbon. So I think it's very important for every corporate to have a strategy around that. And this is something, which we were discussing when we were preparing for this call. In many times, what I found, especially on ESG, each company has a lot of data, but often they don't document it. And I think that's something which is easy win, is to basically from the top start to align your thinking around ESG, and when you're reporting annual reports, website, start to capture that data and already start to report it.
Excellent. Thank you. That was a brilliant ending, because that is something that especially the companies here should have to start to understand and move forward with. And actually, as Recep is mentioning, and as you would know as well, looking into Turkish companies, there have been a lot of companies actually doing a lot of good work, but they just don't represent it, or they don't think it's important in that respect. Very briefly in Turkish, Ashwinder'ın söylediği çok önemli bir konu. Geçen yıl 37 milyar dolar olan bono yatırımı sadece bu yılın başlangıcından bugüne 56 anlaşmayla 23 milyar dolar oldu. Bu ne kadar süratli geliştiğini gösteriyor dedi. Avrupa Birliği normlarının süratle ilerlemesi şirketler açısından, onların hatta ihracatları açısından, ilişkileri açısından çok önemli olacak dedi. Ve en sonunda çok önemli bir şey söyledi. Dedi ki birçok şirket dedi çok iyi şeyler yapıyor ama bunu dokümente etmiyor, internet sitesine yansıtmıyor. Eli, for you the same question. Some of the examples that you want to present, anything you want to give in thought. Thank you.
Sure. I mean, firstly, what Ashwinder said, I think really was an excellent summary of what's going on. So there's really little to add from my side. All I'm going to say is on the equity side as well, we're seeing an explosion of products, an explosion of funding going into areas that are sustainable, ESG, and so on. But I think the growth is for everybody to see is very clear, and it will continue. But I think the next important step is really going to be to separate from those that are really doing sustainable and that are really taking ESG into their core, rather than just writing on the label of the product that's sustainable and ESG. And again, on this, something Ashwinder said is extremely important, and that's the EU taxonomy. I mean, the EU taxonomy, the classification of every single activity, in terms of whether it's sustainable or not is a huge improvement. And with that, a flood of regulation is coming from the EU. It's not just the taxonomy. Taxonomy is a very big part of the EU Sustainable Finance Action Plan, but there's a lot more to it. And as that comes into play, all those funds and all those companies that are claiming that they're sustainable, that they're taking into ESG into consideration, will actually have to prove it, and will have to disclose the data to show how much of their activities are aligned with the EU taxonomy. And I think that is going to be the next very big important step, both for asset managers, but also for corporates. So if you're a corporate in Turkey today, but if you're in the supply chain of any European company, then you're going to be very much affected from these regulations. So you better pay a lot of attention to it.
Excellent. Thank you, Eli. That was very good. Şöyle bir kısaca bahsetmek gerekirse Eli Bey'in de vurgu yaptığı nokta yine Avrupa Birliği normları üzerinden açıkçası. Çünkü bunun doğrudan artık hem yatırım hem yatırımcı hem de etkilenen şirketler tarafından günün normali haline geleceğini ifade etti. Hatta o kadar günün normali haline geliyor ki bu iş dedi. Yani eskiden birazcık hani bu konularda önemli adım attığını düşünenler için bir adım daha ileri gitmeleri gerekiyor. O da neticede tamamen bütün proseslerinin, bütün hani yaptıklarının analizi ve dikkatli analizi açısından daha hassas bir döneme girilmiş olacak ve rakamlar da hakikaten çok hızlı artıyor dedi. Son 1 dakika Recep Bey size veriyorum. Biraz kısa bir zaman ama rica edeceğim.
Maybe as a last thing, I'd like to mention about the initiatives of Borsa İstanbul as an enabler and the facilitator to promote ESG and sustainability for not only for the to meet the data and information needs of the international investors, but also for the sustainable growth of the and sustainable returns for the listed companies. With this various stakeholders, it's multi-parties are represented in our sustainability platform established by Borsa İstanbul in 2015, right after the being signatory of the Sustainable Stock Exchange Initiative. Borsa İstanbul was one of the first 5 founders of the Sustainable Stock Exchange Initiative of the United Nations. Then this number, since 2012, reached to 90 worldwide. So the ESG and sustainability increased enormous awareness and momentum also at the stock exchange, promoted by the exchange of worldwide. And of course, we also formed, Borsa İstanbul formed its sustainability index in 2014. Since then, the companies are disclosing their ESG information. Some companies disclosing, and this assessment of this data and information released by the companies are made by the international company EMRI, and partially funded and supported by the Borsa İstanbul itself, the cost of these assessments and ratings. In recent times, last year, which I have to mention about this briefly, which is a good example of the public-private partnership within this, through this also sustainability platform in Borsa İstanbul, the Coordination Council for the Improvement of the Investment Environment in Turkey, which is chaired by the Vice President of Republic of Turkey, they set up an action plan, and one of the action items in this plan was to increase the to take more share from the international sustainable funds. So we, including Cenk, the distinguished moderator of this panel, we work hard with all stakeholders at the Borsa Istanbul and come up with some proposals to Capital Market Board, for example, to the disclosure of the ESG and sustainability information.
For the sake of time, unfortunately, we're told to close. Yes.
And at the end, last year, the Capital Market Board issued this ESG disclosure regulation and made it mandatory for all public companies. It's a maybe giant leap for us, but small for the countries in advanced stage, which we will believe that this data and information on ESG of public companies will help attracting more international capital to
Excellent.
Turkey. Thank you very much.
I think we wrapped it almost in time. Thank you everyone. Herkese çok teşekkürler. İnşallah tekrar buluşmak dileğiyle. İyi günler diliyorum herkese.
Thank you very much.